This episode is brought to you by Joanne Barron.
We had that hope, all of us staying at home, not driving, for instance, not flying, would bring down pollution. But when you look at the numbers, that did not happen. The parts per million of CO2 in the atmosphere keep rising. It's because it's a very complex system, and it's not just us individuals.
Hello and welcome back to season 3 of Women of Wayland podcast. This is Yamini, your host, and we had a great summer break, and I hope you have had a good one too. I mean, apart from all the raining all summer long. We are so glad to be back. As you know, this season we are raising money for 2 Wayland nonprofits through the podcast. We featured the first nonprofit, Loose Change, earlier this season. This episode is about the second nonprofit we are fundraising for, Mass Energize. How long do you think it takes for someone to know a neighborhood? How about 41 years? Yes, that is how long Joanne has been a Wayland resident. And today she is helping us bring this episode to you. Joanne grew up in Newton and before her real estate career owned a successful cafe and catering business in Weston for 16 years. Transitioning into residential sales came naturally. Joanne's ability to network, her extensive knowledge of the area, its neighborhoods and schools, attention to detail, unwavering commitment to her clients, and her desire to do whatever it takes to get the job done sets her apart from other realtors. Whether you are buying your first home, searching for your dream home, or downsizing, Joanne will guide you through the process with compassion and honesty. To know more about her, follow her handle on Instagram, Live in Wayland. And to connect with her, email her at joanne.barron@compass.com. You'll find all the details in our show note. Many consider climate change to be the defining issue of our generation. We have debated its existence and the magnitude of its effect on our lives for decades now. But in recent times, the research community has produced evidence showcasing how climate change is impacting communities around the world. But what do we infer from the climate change activism around us? How do we implement these scientific findings in our lives on a local level? Kaat Vander Straeten is a climate activist from Wayland. In 2015, she was presented with the Lydia Maria Child Award for her extensive work showing residents and students how to live self-sustaining lifestyle to protect the environment. With the onset of COVID-19 crisis, there was a resurgence in discussions surrounding the impact we are having on the climate. We saw news of pollution levels plummeting in April 2020 to such levels that mountain people had not seen in a lifetime became visible. Wildlife reappeared in our cities, making us realize that we really do share this planet with them. However, this soon faded away as the coronavirus ran havoc across the globe. In all likelihood, we as a race will probably defeat the coronavirus within the next few years. And that's the hope. But will we ever be able to rein in climate change? The question lingers. Today we have in our studio Kaat, also lovingly known as Kat in the community. Kat is a lead coordinator of EnergizeWayland, an associate member of Wayland Energy and Climate Committee, and a coordinator for the Wayland Climate Mobilization. Kaat co-founded Mass Energize. She received Wayland's Lydia Maria Child Award for her service to the town in all things green. Kaat was also the coach for Wayland's 2 successful Solarize Mass campaigns and the founder of Transition Wayland. Her full-time activism has followed the transition town's view that the local is the key to resilience because the local is personal and local is everywhere. Hello and welcome to our show, Kaat. Thank you so much. It's our pleasure to have you here on our show today.
Thank you for having me, Yamini.
So, Kaat, how did you end up in Wayland?
So I grew up in Belgium, and I wanted to go into the doctorate program in Belgium at my university there. But I had to get a certain scholarship in order to get into that program. And I wasn't sure I was going to get it. So my plan B, as it were, was to also apply for a master's in the States, which really appealed to me. I applied for both. I got both, and they allowed me to do both at the same time.
Wow.
Which is super exciting. Yeah, it was. So I arrived here in 1998, I believe it was, in Boston, and I started the master's at Boston University. And then I met my husband-to-be, and a professor there asked me to switch to the PhD program at Boston University as well. Right. So this was a change in plans. I also realized that on my scholarship, I only had money for 1 year, and you can't do the master's in 1 year. It takes 2 years. So it all worked out. And I switched to the PhD program. And I married my husband here, and we settled here.
And where is your husband from?
He is from Calcutta in India.
Oh, how wonderful is that? That makes me happy a little bit, tiny bit. All right. Kaat, so how did you get into this? Were you always passionate about this topic?
So climate change was not on my radar at all, like it wasn't for most people back then. And I'm talking about 2005. But I had just given birth to my child. I was looking on the internet and I came across a blog by a woman called Sharon Astick. She used to be a blogger on climate change. And it really opened my eyes. It was quite amazing, the switch that was thrown. I must have been ready somehow to hear this news. And for a while there, it really spooked me. It was quite disconcerting to read all the scientific data. I didn't quite know what to do with that. So we were living in Brookline in a little small basement apartment in Brookline, which was quite great. But I wanted to do things like grow my own food. This was a little condo, so there was not even a garden to do this. I wanted to compost food scraps. There was no way to do that. I want to do all kinds of things just for my household so that we could do something about climate change. These are the first steps, that you take. And we couldn't. So that's actually why we decided to come to Wayland in 2008. To move here so we could have a house with a garden. So it's only around that time that I became aware of this. And then slowly, as we arrived in Wayland, I started doing that garden. I learned how to keep bees. I learned how to grow mushrooms.
Oh my God.
We did a lot of things in our house. We put on solar photovoltaics. We put on solar hot water. So for 2 years, we did stuff in the household, in that first sphere of influence. That's where, I had the most influence, obviously, my home, my house, my family. We also became very much fans of local food and organic food. So in all domains, we made quite a few changes. And then slowly I started realizing that if you want to do something about climate change, you need to step out of your sphere of influence.
That is absolutely true, Kaat. So building on that, I want to know how you started Transition Wayland and your association with Mass Energize, and how did this idea come to you?
When I realized that just what we're doing in the household is not really going to make much of a difference. It makes some difference, especially as a first step to more action, but you have to take the next step. And for me, that was in 2012. I decided, I really want to do this with others. And there must be others in town who have the same concern and the same drive for doing something about it. So I put a little ad in the town crier saying, concerned about climate change, come join me at the library at so-and-so date. That was it. So I arrived at the library and there are quite a few people there. It was quite magical. And a lot of those folks actually stuck around, and we made a little action group called Transition Wayland.
How many people turned up for that meeting?
So at that meeting, there were about 15 people. And I would say about 7 of them stayed for years. For years, we ran Transition Wayland, which is based on the transition model of doing outreach, community building, and working on resilience. And so Transition Wayland was the organization responsible for quite a few Earth Day festivals here in Wayland, townwide cleanups every spring. We organized those as well. We started a beekeeping club. We did quite a few workshops around food and around energy, of course. Energy is the biggest, actually beside food, is the biggest guzzler of fossil fuels. So, and we did movie screenings, all those things that little community organizations do. One of the big things we did was the Solarize campaign in 2012. Okay. With Solarize, we campaigned on putting rooftop solar in Wayland. And that was a very successful campaign. quite a few people put the rooftop up. And of course, because it is so visible in the street, that Solarize campaign in 2012 really jumpstart the growth of solar in town, because your neighbor has it. It's a good deal. You hear from your neighbor that it's a great deal, so you go for it. A nice short campaign, and it was lovely because I met so many people who I hadn't met yet, and this is what I love about community organizing, is I meet a lot of people. If in the end, there's more rooftop solar, that's great. But for me, the value is really in meeting people and getting to know them and connecting them to one another and getting them excited about something, right? So we did a second Solarize campaign in 2017, I think. And that was much harder. That because everyone who was excited about solar and who could do it had already done it in the previous years.
Okay.
So with this new campaign, I realized that this is much harder work. This is sort of the second tier of people, and it was tough. It was not as successful, and I learned a lot of lessons from that. In the meantime, Transition Wayland had sort of slowed down. Everyone who was involved in that kind of drifted off to do their own project.
Right.
And my project that I drifted off into was EnergizeWayland, which was a collaboration with Ellen Tone of the Energy and Climate Committee. They changed their name in the meantime to Energy and Climate Committee.
Energy and Climate, okay.
And we did, and that's where the second Solarize came out of. So the lesson there was, look, I'm doing all this work, all as volunteers, right? I've always been a volunteer. We're doing so much work reaching out to people about solar PV. That's it. We meet those people at the farmer's market. Sometimes I would do 5-hour stints at the farmer's market.
Wow.
Talking to people.
That's incredible, Kaat.
And so much fun. It's a lot of work, and at the end you have no voice left.
You enjoy it. You're passionate about it.
And it's always wonderful. So you do all that work reaching out to people. You get them excited because it is a good deal. It is good for the planet. It's a wonderful thing to do. And then after hours of that, you visit their home, for instance, if they ask you to come over and have a look. If their home would be suitable, you drive into the parking lot and you know instantly that they are one of those shady neighbors, we call them. The shady neighbors. That's Wayland. It's a shady place. So, and then sort of your heart drops because you have to go in and tell them, well, you'll have to take those trees down, and we really don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And it's disempowering to them. It's disempowering to me. All that work for nothing. So we realized in EnergizeWayland, there's so many other things that people can do, so many other actions, from buying an electric vehicle to line drying your laundry. But we were there for solar PV only, and we had to walk away because they couldn't do it.
Right.
So what should we do? We should really be able to offer someone who says no or yes to solar all the other stuff they can do as well. So we messed around a little bit with flyers or little infographics with, you could also do this and this and this with printed URLs, and it just did not work. Every time something changed, you had to change the flyers. So we, Ellen, my colleague in EnergizeWayland, has a dear friend who's a genius coder, and he said, I could code you up a little website that sort of acts like a shopping cart, like a shop with a shopping cart, and the shop would have all these actions, and you could click I want to do this, and it goes on your to-do list.
That is such a brilliant idea.
It was well designed. The three of us kind of hashed it out, and so he built it just for Wayland. It was just for Wayland. And it worked so well. It was great. It was interactive. People loved going there and clicking I've done it. The I've done it button is very popular. And we could now reach out to someone about one thing. But if they could do it or if they couldn't do it, it didn't matter. We could also send them to this website for all this other stuff they could do. And out of that came this idea for a platform, and other towns wanted it too. Other organizers were like, I want that. Can I have it? We couldn't because it was only built for one town, and letting another town use it as well would have messed it all up. So that's when we decided to create a non-profit called Mass Energize, which is now a successful non-profit, growing very fast.
Wow, that was some journey, Kaat, and I really loved how there were lessons on the way, and that led to improvement and led to Mass Energize being in other towns as well. It's wonderful to see this journey. I could just visualize how when you were talking about the story. Now I'm gonna take you to a broader topic, Kat, something that has bugged me, a question that has bugged me for long. I can see what drives the climate change activists. What I do not get is why is the other half completely indifferent or chooses to ignore this? Why do you think people do not recognize climate change as a serious threat and call it a hoax?
Well, again, it's complex. So there's all kinds of people with all kinds of backgrounds and opinions. I think the majority, though, are not denying the science of climate change. They are.
You're right about that. I just wanted to throw in and statistics that I learned. So 7% of the Americans are fully dismissive of the climate change aspect, and 10% of the Americans are doubtful about it. And despite the numbers being so low, these are the people who are also very dominant on social media platform calling climate change a hoax.
Yeah.
So yeah, not many, but they're having an impact on other people's psyche.
Yes. Well, I like to. That's just 17%, and it depends on where you live. These are national numbers.
National numbers.
Yeah, in a place like Wayland, 17% of Waylanders are not like that. So again, and as a local organizer, I love the local because I can really know the people that I'm talking to. I'm not just sending out mass emails for someone to click a button to people I don't know. Whenever I send an email to an email list, like our EnergizeWayland email list, for instance, I know 70% of the people personally on that email list. I know who I'm talking to. So there's that. I think that of the other percentage, the vast majority of people here, and I only want to talk about Waylanders. I think quite a few people have not yet gotten going on changing their lifestyle. Not because they deny the science. I think they deny their feeling of power. I think they think that what they do doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
They deny their own power. And that is where my main interest lies, is how can I make people show that they have power? They have power when they go to the grocery store. They have power when they replace that oil furnace. They have power when, they are offered a deal for solar PV. They have power when they have to replace their old car and they can buy an electric vehicle. We do have power. We have in Wayland quite a bit of financial power. We have great education.
Yes.
We have fantastic connection. This is a very well-connected town. We don't have to do these things alone. Just the fact that there's EnergizeWayland looking at installers of solar PV who have already done all that work for you. So you don't have to spend too much time looking through installers, and you can just go for the best deal that we've already found. That in itself is a power too that you have. All kinds of, there's all kinds of ways that we can empower people. And that's what we're in as activists. We want to empower folks. We don't want the power for ourselves. that would be not very effective at all. We want everyone to come into their power, as it were. And that's really what we campaign on. So yeah, people know deep in their hearts that climate change is here. You just have to look around. You just have to look at, my bird feeder. 10 years ago, there were so many birds. Where are they? Where are all the insects that used to smudge my windshield? Everyone knows this from the science, from daily observation, from their own experience. But they're afraid to act on it because they feel, well, it's scary, of course, but they also feel powerless. And they really are wrong in that, I believe. I believe we have, as humans, great power on our environment, for the worse. Absolutely. So far, for the best, entirely possible.
Absolutely.
One of my permaculture teachers says that he has this great quote. He says, well, if we start living regeneratively, that is, if we start living not just sustainably. To live sustainably, I don't like to use that term, because it just means I'm going to sustain the things as they are. And things as they are not good. Mm-hmm. I do not want to sustain those at all. That's business as usual, right? I want to live regeneratively, which means that I actually make my place better, right, and more lively and more resilient. So he says, once we start living regeneratively, having a footprint will be a great thing. You will have a positive footprint. You want to have a large footprint if you live regeneratively. And I love that. And it really is possible for us to do so.
That's a wonderful term, Kaat. I totally love that word, and I'm going to put it in the habit of, using it more often. So how do you define this, not the sustainable living? How do you define this regenerative living?
Regenerative living it's different from sustainable living. Sustainable is you just sustain how things are. In our culture, we love how things are. We are very comfortable. We have, in the history of mankind, been the most comfortable than ever, more comfortable than ever. And I use the word comfortable very deliberately, because when you look at our culture, comfort is basically synonymous with happiness. So why would we change things if we're comfortable? And things aren't that bad yet, maybe in the future, but our habit, actually our addiction to comfort, stops us from looking ahead, makes us very short-term thinkers.
Right.
And that's what, to me, sustainable means. That's just sustained is what we're doing. What we're doing is wreaking havoc, obviously.
Oh.
The pickle we're in is because we love our comfort so much.
Mm-hmm.
So regenerative living is sort of the next step up, much better step, or a step back, maybe, is a good way of putting it as well. In regenerative living, everything you do in your life, everything that you have power over in your household, in your community, when you go vote, when you go shop, you think, is this product, is this act good for my environment? An environment, you can define it quite broadly. It is, the natural environment. It is your community's environment. Civic action, for instance, like politeness in discourse, is a regenerative act. You make the discourse better and more inviting, so that regenerates discourse. And then you can go further out. Is this a good act for the planet? If I buy, a chicken that was reared in the US, shipped all the way to China to be skinned and deboned, and then shipped all the way back to the US for me to buy, that's not a good act. So it sustains my comfort because I like that chicken, but it is not a regenerative act. Regeneratively, I would buy local chicken and support that local farm, which then next year will be able to grow more food for local people. That's regenerative living. So you just you have a positive footprint. You have a positive effect on all kinds of scales of your environment.
And you said, I think I read a line on your website which said, local is the key to resilience, and local is everywhere. So,
Yes.
So when we start from the grassroots level, that's how we build up.
Yeah. The idea with local is, and this is a systems theory insight, When you have a system like we have, let's say food system, where we are dependent on food that comes in supermarkets that comes from very far away. Those are very long distribution chains. The chain from the source to the shop is very, very long, and it's easy to disrupt those chains. A lot of food travels along those chains as well. And for instance, with these E. coli outbreaks, for instance, um, entire supermarket shelves go empty because they had to pull all of that product. It all got destroyed.
Oh, God.
Because somewhere along that long chain, there was an E. coli contamination, and everything beyond
Yes.
it
Yeah.
was ruined. Oftentimes, also you do not know where it happened along the chain because the chain is so long again. And of course, a lot of fossil fuels go into that chain because it does have to be trucked all the way from California to here. So there's a lot of problems with these long distribution chains. The shorter you make the chains, the more resilient the system is. And resilience
Oh,
is
yes.
a way of being able to adapt to problems. If I, for instance, have three local farms around me, and one of those farms, the barn burns down, these things happen. There are still two other farms where I can get my food. If contamination happens, I know exactly where it happened. It happened between the farm and my house. So we can catch it early and address it. Another thing is with these short chains, I can know exactly how that farmer grows their food. I can go to the farm and I can just ask him, do you use pesticides? Do you use hormones in your livestock? So with these shorter chains, much closer by, you have a lot more control, a lot more insight. It's more resilient.
Right.
So that's resiliency is actually one of those keywords, along with regenerative. It has to be regenerative and resilient. And then, if something happens over in California, like the wildfires,
Wildfire.
taking down the whole agricultural system, over here we're good. We have local farms that can give us food. It does require a change in mindset on the buyers.
So, coming back to your point, Kat, where you're talking about the mindset of the people, many people have a notion that living sustainably, or in your words, living regeneratively, is expensive. How do we tackle that? Yes, you spoke about how comfortable we get in a sustainable living, but to get this into our system and change our system for the good, how do we tackle that? What are the factors that affect this choice most?
How do we tackle the expense? And what we're really talking about is the deeper social systemic problem of the disparity in income amongst us, right? First, there's a couple of answers to that. First of all, a lot of the food that is not good for us, that comes along long distribution chains, that have a lot of fossil fuels backing them up, are subsidized foods. They have been subsidized by the government. If those subsidies went instead to organic food would be much cheaper.
And why do you think it's not being done?
So that is national and global politics, and I'm a local organizer, so I kind of put that question aside. I have thoughts about that, but I don't feel that I have power there. And I always like to focus on what I can do, not on what I can't do. It's a bit of a stoicism.
True that.
So that there's one of the causes of this expense of the organic food, for instance. Now, we can do something about it, we as consumers. There are quite a few of us who, not all of us, for sure, and I totally recognize that, but quite a few of us do have the financial power to start supporting local organic food. And the more of us pay that premium price to do so, the cheaper that will become. It's just supply and demand, right? So, well, not just, but some subsidies would be great as well. But that's what we call early adopters. The first electric vehicles were quite expensive, but the early adopters started buying those, and they kind of kickstarted that market. And so slowly, electric vehicles got cheaper and cheaper. Also, with the help of some subsidies. So you see, it's always complex. There's
Yes.
never just one solution. But that's the point. We can be part of the solution. We can't do all of it, but we can do our part. So, for instance, my husband and I, we have a CSA. That's a community shared agricultural box from
I had
a
it
local
last
farm
year.
here. Yeah, they're great. They cost a bit more, although in the end, when you get that box and you open the box, and oftentimes you've helped pull those carrots yourself from the ground,
Yeah.
you will be much more, or I shouldn't say, I will be much more careful with that food. I'll waste much less of it because it's personal food. I've personally pulled that carrot, maybe not that one, but I know the farmer. I know, I've chatted with him. I know how he puts his heart and soul into it. So this food is just more valuable. And when I eat it, it tastes better. I mean, it tastes better as is, and it is more nutritious and all of that stuff. So, but it is worth the cost to me, and I have the privilege of being able to pay that cost. So I do so. Now, however, if I put more of my budget into food, because I can, some other budget needs to be reduced, right? I mean, I don't have infinite income,
Yeah.
obviously.
You can manage that budget from
Yes.
somewhere else. Yeah.
And I think the way we look at it is we're talking about dollars here, but we're really talking about value. What do you value in life? And again, I want to press that this is a privileged point of view. I have that privilege, but I want to use it for the better. And the way I look at it is like, okay, I will travel less. I won't, for instance, get on an airplane and fly somewhere for tourism. We just don't do that. So so people might say like, well, you lost something there. But I believe I actually gained something. It is just your perspective on what is valuable that you switch. And then it is not a matter of scarcity. This is another thing that people fear is like, I'm going to have to sacrifice something.
Yes, I was about to say, do you think minimalism is connected with living better?
It depends on what you mean by minimalism, but oftentimes there are problems with minimalism because that whole lifestyle is based on scarcity. And actually, for a long time, climate activists and other activists really loved scarcity. It's going to be scarce, which was a fearful thing. And so we have to reduce, reduce, reduce.
Oh my goodness. You've made an amazing point, excellent point here, Kat. Every time somebody wants to have an impact, they're talking, they come from a place of, they bring people to the place of fear. And that's not good. That makes them more, it's just not a good place to start from. Coming back to this, I wanted to understand. We mobilized all our institution and collaborated across borders to fight the COVID. What level of mobilization and collaboration do you think is required for climate change? And who do you think are the key players in this?
Oh, that's a great question. And I would say all of us, all of them. So there's a tendency, especially among policymakers and the larger organizations working on this, and also science, that there is one solution. We love this in our culture. You have a problem, there's one solution that's the best thing. It's the big solution, and that will fix it. Climate change, I think, if not as a problem, it is not a problem. It's what we call a predicament. So the difference is problems have solutions. Predicaments do not have solutions. And if it's just the way it is, you're going to have to live with it. It's here, it's not going to leave. And There's a lot of it in the pipeline that we cannot stop. And so we have to live in this predicament. If you mistake a predicament as a problem, you're going to throw all these solutions at it, and they're going to make it worse because you've misdiagnosed the situation. And this is what we have been seeing, right? Many solutions to problems that have an unintentional effect and made it worse. We have to think of climate change quite differently now. So climate change is a predicament that is very, very complex. It's basically, a nest of predicaments. And so each of those needs different actors to make it work, to make it less bad, and to adapt to it as well. There's some adaptation that's going to happen as well. And all of us at all scales are part of the solution, though I don't know what of the adaptation or of the living with it. So I don't want to point out one actor over another. You can sort of, like, some actors obviously have a lot more power than others. The President of the United States, I mean, what he's doing right now, that looks like it's going in the right direction. For instance, here in Wayland, we're going to have a town meeting article in May, where we're going to talk about community choice electricity, where the town will buy electricity and will demand for everyone in town, and will demand that part of that electricity is green. Any resident in town who doesn't want that, who just wants to stay with their same old electricity provider, they can opt out.
Oh,
but this will be a good deal because you're buying electricity in bulk, and you make part of it green. That's a big lever that we can pull for all the residents in town.
Interesting.
So there are some nice big levers that you can pull. But in the end, because it's a predicament and it's a complex system, everyone will have to pitch in. Everyone will have to find the abundance of doing something about this. And that's actually what EnergizeWayland offers on the EnergizeWayland.org platform. Is there are so many things you can do, from the expensive stuff like buying a new car, an electric car, to line drying your laundry. But each of those things makes something happen, and that's all we need. Let's all make something happen.
Yeah.
And again, this goes back to saving the world, right? Let's not have that mindset. Let's not find the one big solution to this big problem. Absolutely. You're not going to find it because it's not a big problem. It's a predicament. So.
This is the mindset that we all have, like, save the world, let's just do things. It's always so big, and we never get to the grassroots of things and on a community level. And it's an individual attitude we all need right now. Coming back to that, today the world is talking about Greta Thunberg. What do you think about her ideology?
Well, about Greta, I really admire her a lot. And boy, she has caught the ear of people in power. She has great courage and passion, and she knows exactly what she wants. She's very transparent. So I've really admired her, and she has really caught the ear of people in power. And she is just absolutely not influenced by the fact that there are people in power. And so this is great. But on the other hand, it is awful that it took a child to bring this to the world's attention. This is really a problem that us adults created. And us adults have the responsibility of doing something about it. And we were all asleep at the wheel. And it took a child to do this. And that breaks my heart. And that tells me something about our culture.
Yep.
So in that sense, I want to thank Greta deeply, with all my heart. But then I like to cast my eyes over the adults in the room that she's talking to and go like, and myself, right? And go like, why did it take her to wake us up? And even then, even after she wakes people up, they go back asleep again, and she has to say it all over again. So it's not just this once. She keeps on doing this. So I love her tenaciousness. But there's something deeply wrong with the fact that it took a a kid to do this, and it still takes a kid to do this.
True.
So that is not right. And Greta caught a lot of criticism.
Yes.
Which to me is, I don't understand where that is coming from. Anyone who criticizes Greta, and some of that criticism was personal and meant to hurt her, and of course shared so publicly by people in power. So this brings us to young people, away from Greta. I don't want to talk about Greta as a person. I don't know her. She's a child. I really feel that she needs her privacy, for sure. We need to fully respect that. But let's talk about young people. I see among young people the same movement happening. They see the world very differently. They're very critical of our culture, which is great. That's what we need to be. But they are critical with this, it seems to me, this added dimension of wanting to see things differently. It's not just negative. They're also changing all kinds of definitions. This is real culture work that the young folks are doing. Again, something us adults were asleep at the wheel, but these young people are arising now, and they are openly criticizing.
Yes.
They are calling it out, like it wasn't me who did this. It's you who did this. This is, of course, in our culture, that is not done. You just don't do that thing. Well, see where we ended up, right? So maybe it is something that needs to be done. But then they also have a compassionate side to it.
Right.
Like you have to call out. You have to call it out, but you have to call it in as well. So you call people out and you call them in too.
Yes.
That bit is very important. And I see that movements that are made up of young people are really starting to get that. Let's call everyone in, no matter how different we are, no matter how much responsibility we've shirked in the past. We're here now, and let's make work of it. That I see is their attitude, and I love that.
Oh, totally. Young people's mobilization around the world, I think, has shown the world and us adults what massive power they possess to hold decision makers accountable. Their message is clear, and they are contributing so much to the climate action right now. Coming to the last question, Kaat, what is your dream, personal and professional, or are they the same?
My personal dream and my dream as an activist are the same. I can no longer keep those apart. For instance, when I go into the supermarket, everything I buy has climate change wrapped up in it. Every decision I make is a decision that comes from my understanding of climate change and what I have to do for community building, etc.
Honestly, Kaat, we should all add this in our personal and professional dream. Thank you so much for coming to our show, Kaat. This was wonderful and insightful.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's really my pleasure, and thank you for doing this. Telling these stories. I think really storytelling is community building. So that you're doing this for us is just priceless. There it is, priceless. And and I thank the listeners too for asking their questions. They're all great questions.
All right, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Thank you for listening and subscribing to our podcast and YouTube channel. Despite the times, we have seen a steady increase in our listenership, and we are very thankful to you all. Stay tuned, we'll be back with another story soon. Till then, signing off, this is your host Yamini, and you were listening to Women of Wayland, the podcast.